I returned to the office after 3 grueling days in Chicago, where I'd closed the largest deal of my career. My client had signed on for a 5-year contract, worth enough to secure our division's budget for the next 2 fiscal years. The flight home had been sleepless, but I walked into the building lighter than I'd felt in months. This was supposed to be a victory lap. But the moment I stepped out of the elevator, I knew something was wrong. The energy of our floor, the constant hum of collaboration, the low buzz of chatter, the tapping of keyboards, was gone. The wide-open space where my team had worked for years was unnervingly silent. Even the overhead lights seemed dimmer. "Carla," I called out, looking for my project manager, who usually beat everyone else in. No answer. My heels echoed too loudly against the polished floors as I moved deeper into the East Wing. That's when I noticed it. The desks were empty. Not just cleared of papers, but stripped bare. Monitors gone, chairs missing. Even the corkboard covered with our inside jokes and late-night pizza receipts had been taken down. Only pale dust outlines remained where our equipment once stood. I froze. The office we had earned, the bright, airy corner space awarded after 3 consecutive quarters of over-delivery, was gone. A voice broke my shock. "Amanda." I turned to see Marcus from HR, holding a stack of folders. His expression was tight, almost apologetic. "Where's my team?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. He hesitated, shifting the folders from one hand to the other. "You should check the basement." "The basement?" My chest tightened. That wasn't office space. It was storage, maintenance, the place interns joked about when they lost Wi-Fi connection. Still, I forced my feet forward. The elevator ride down felt longer than my entire flight from Chicago. Each floor passed with a metallic groan, the sense of dread pressing harder against my ribs. When the doors opened, the air changed immediately. Stale, damp, with the faint smell of mildew. I followed extension cords that snaked along the floor, past stacks of old chairs and broken printers, until I found a door with a crooked piece of paper taped to it. In bold black marker, "Marketing Team B," my team. I pushed the door open. They were there, huddled together under low pipes and fluorescent lights that flickered like they were apologizing for existing. Their monitors balanced precariously on folding tables, cables tangled like jungle vines. A bucket caught water dripping from the ceiling, landing with hollow plunks beside Carla's desk. The faces that looked up at me weren't just tired. They were humiliated. "What happened?" I whispered, though I already knew. Carla's voice cracked as she spoke. "While you were gone, John came down with movers, said we had 30 minutes to relocate, for his new hire." A bitter laugh slipped from Eric, our copywriter. "The golden boy. Some kid fresh out of a boutique agency. Apparently he's going to revolutionize the department." My jaw clenched. John, our new department head. Barely 6 months in, desperate to impress the executives. And apparently willing to sacrifice the people who carried this company through late nights and impossible deadlines just to prop up a single flashy hire. I glanced at the faces around me. Carla, who had turned down higher-paying offers just to stay with this team. Eric, who had stayed up 3 nights straight rewriting a campaign that ended up saving a $1 million client. May, whose designs had become the backbone of our brand identity. Years of loyalty, years of results. And this was their reward? I took a deep breath. "Pack your bags," I said. Confusion flickered across their faces. "Not just for down here," I clarified. "For good. Quietly, without raising suspicion. Gather your work, your files, anything you want to keep, and don't mention this conversation to anyone else." Silence filled the basement. A silence so heavy I could feel it pressing against my skin. Then, slowly, Carla nodded. May reached for her notebook. Eric pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, his hands trembling. They didn't fully understand yet. But they trusted me. And John had no idea what was coming. By the time I climbed back upstairs, my pulse had steadied, but the anger hadn't left. I walked straight toward our old office, the space that had once felt like home. Through the glass walls, I saw him. The golden boy. He couldn't have been more than 26. Clean suit, hair styled like he'd walked straight out of a magazine spread. He was arranging framed certificates across the desk that had been mine, setting them down with a careful pride. His laptop gleamed, brand new. His chair, the one I'd personally picked for ergonomic support during our late nights, now rolled under his hand. And standing beside him was John, our department head. "Ah, Amanda," he said when he noticed me. His voice carried too much brightness, the kind used to mask guilt. "Back from Chicago already. Come in, come in." I didn't move. I stayed in the doorway, arms crossed. "This is Adrian," John continued, gesturing toward the young man. "Our new innovation strategist. He's here to help transform the department. Fresh ideas, bold perspectives, the kind of disruption we need." Adrian offered me a polite smile, but didn't stop arranging his certificates. Harvard, Yale, an internship with some boutique firm in New York. The type of shiny accolades executives adored. I said nothing. John lowered his voice as though confiding a secret. "We've moved your team temporarily. Basement space is all we had available until the next budget cycle. They'll be fine. It's only a few months. Meanwhile, Adrian will be leading our next big campaign. You'll support him, of course." The words hit like a slap. Support him? After everything my team had delivered? After the deal I'd just closed that secured the very budget John was pretending didn't exist? I kept my tone even. "You put my team in a basement with leaking pipes so one person could sit here?" John's smile tightened. "Amanda, I know it's not ideal, but this is the direction the company's moving in. Results are good, but optics matter. Adrian knows how to speak the language executives want to hear. You've always been reliable, but we need someone who can shine." There it was. Reliable. The word they use when they want to dismiss you politely. Not brilliant. Not essential. Just reliable. I felt something settle inside me then. A quiet clarity. "I see," I said softly. John mistook my calm for acceptance. He smiled wider. "Excellent. I knew you'd understand. Now, why don't you give Adrian access to the files from Chicago? He'll need them for the presentation next week." For a moment, I almost laughed. The deal I'd just closed, my deal, was being handed to someone who hadn't even been in the building when the first pitch was made. But I didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, I turned, walked out, and headed back to the basement. When I opened the door, the room fell silent. My team's eyes darted to mine, searching for answers. Carla spoke first. "Well?" I looked at them. The 7 people who had given years of loyalty, who had pulled all-nighters, who had sacrificed weekends and birthdays for impossible deadlines. And now, shoved underground so a stranger could play hero. I forced a smile, though my chest was burning. He's exactly what you imagined. Young, shiny, full of buzzwords. John is convinced he's the future. Eric swore under his breath. May's eyes welled with tears she quickly wiped away. "But here's the thing," I continued. "He doesn't know what we know. He doesn't have our history, our skills, or our trust. And John? He's too blinded to see it. That's fine. Let them underestimate us." Carla frowned. "Amanda, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I replied, lowering my voice, "that we're not going to fight this in the open. Not yet. We're going to keep working, keep documenting, keep doing everything with excellence. But at the same time, we prepare. Quietly. For ourselves, not for them." The room stayed silent, the hum of the fluorescent light buzzing like a warning. Finally, Vega, the oldest of us, spoke. "You mean, leave?" "Eventually," I said. "But not in pieces, not resignations that trickle away unnoticed. Together, when the time is right." They exchanged glances. Some looked hopeful, others scared. Ren, the youngest, leaned forward. "But where would we even go? Who would take all of us?" I thought of my contacts. The clients I'd nurtured over the years, the network I'd built quietly while John played politics. A dozen possibilities flashed through my mind. That, I said slowly, is what I'll figure out. In the meantime, we work. We deliver. But everything we do, every draft, every design, every report, we keep copies. Our work belongs to us, not to someone who sees us as furniture to be shuffled around. Carla's lips curved into the faintest smile. Vega nodded once, solemn. Eric straightened his posture as though remembering who he was. I looked around the room, feeling the fire spread from me to them. Trust me, I whispered. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. For the first time that day, hope replaced humiliation in their eyes. John thought he'd buried us in a basement. He had no idea he'd just given us the perfect place to plan. For the next 2 weeks, life in the basement became our new reality. The air smelled faintly of mildew. The flickering fluorescent light gave half the team headaches. And every time the plumbing groaned above us, I felt the insult all over again. But my team showed up every day, still producing excellent work, still meeting deadlines, still loyal. It wasn't lost on me how much strength it took. I kept my promise to them. We worked as though nothing had changed. But quietly behind the scenes, I prepared. Every file we produced, every report, every campaign draft, we archived. Not just in the company system, but privately, in organized folders only we controlled. I instructed each team member to back up their contributions, to track revisions, to keep detailed notes. Why? Darius, our analyst, asked one afternoon. They don't care about our work anymore. Because we do, I told him, and because one day someone else will. The truth was, I'd already started reaching out. A call here, a message there. Former colleagues, old clients, people I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't pitch anything yet. I was planting seeds, reconnecting, testing the ground. And while I worked quietly, upstairs, cracks began to appear in John's masterpiece. The first came during Adrian's innovation presentation. He stood in front of a dozen executives delivering slides full of buzzwords. Disruption, synergy, paradigm shift. He had polished graphs, colorful visuals, and a smile that never wavered. But when the questions started, real questions, his facade slipped. How does this scale with our current client portfolio? One executive asked. Adrian blinked. Well, that's something I'm still modeling. What about integration with existing campaigns? Another pressed. Adrian stammered. That will, depend on adoption rates. I heard about it later from a colleague who slipped into the basement to warn me. The kid froze, she whispered, glancing around as though sharing state secrets. John had to jump in and spin it. Executives didn't look impressed. I smiled quietly. Not because I enjoyed watching Adrian fail, but because the truth always finds its way out. Flash fades fast under pressure. The second crack came a week later. Adrian had been handed oversight of the campaign I'd secured in Chicago. My deal. My client. He was supposed to prepare the launch plan. Instead, he dumped half-finished drafts on my team. Just polish this up for me, he told Carla, as though she were an assistant. Carla, professional as always, nodded. But when she showed me the files, I nearly laughed. They weren't even coherent. Fluffy slogans, empty catchphrases, zero data. He expects us to fix this? She asked, eyes blazing. Yes, I said calmly. And we will, but we'll also keep the originals. We cleaned his mess, delivered a polished product, and watched as John paraded Adrian upstairs to present it. I heard later how Adrian had smiled proudly as though he'd crafted every line. My team's faces fell when they heard. He's taking credit for our work, May whispered. I know, I told them. And we'll let him. For now. Because each stolen draft, each presentation where Adrian faltered, each panicked email John sent to cover his protégé's mistakes, it was all part of the story that was quietly writing itself. One Friday evening, I stayed late, alone in the basement. The others had gone home, but I needed the silence to think. My phone buzzed with a message from an old client. "Let's catch up next week. I've been hearing interesting things about your company." I stared at the screen for a long moment. The network I'd nurtured for years was still alive. And now, they were watching. That's when I realized something important. John thought burying us in the basement made us invisible, but it had done the opposite. Executives were starting to ask questions. Clients were curious. And every day, Adrian revealed how little substance he had. The humiliation was real, but so was the opportunity. I closed my laptop, the sound echoing in the concrete room, and whispered into the empty air. Not much longer. The next Monday, John himself came down to the basement. He never set foot there unless he had to. He leaned against a folding table, his smile stretched too thin. "Good news," he announced. "We're considering moving you back upstairs. Not to your old space, of course. That's occupied. But the East Wing is being renovated. Might be ready by next quarter." My team exchanged glances. Hope flickered in Ren's eyes. Even Eric sat a little taller. I forced myself to smile. "That's very generous of you, John." He relaxed, mistaking my words for gratitude. But inside, I was already thinking ahead. Because I knew something my team didn't. This wasn't generosity. It was desperation. The executives had started to doubt him, and he needed us visible again to cover Adrian's failures. It was too late. My team thought they were waiting for redemption. I knew we were preparing for escape. And John? He had no idea the ground beneath him was already starting to crack. By the time February rolled around, the cracks in John's Golden Boy experiment were becoming impossible to ignore. Adrian had charm, yes, and he could talk circles around buzzwords. But the moment anyone pressed for detail, he floundered. The executives were starting to notice. My team heard it in whispers from colleagues. Does he actually know what he's doing? But John still clung to him like a lifeline. Down in the basement, we carried on, day after day. The dripping pipes, the buzzing lights, the smell of damp cardboard. Those things became part of our routine. What mattered wasn't the conditions. It was the quiet shift happening within my team. They weren't beaten down anymore. They were waiting. Each day, I gave them quiet tasks, archive projects, update documentation, polish transition guides. It looked like we were simply doing due diligence. In reality, we were preparing to walk out with everything organized, ready to hit the ground running somewhere else. One Wednesday, Ren cornered me as we were leaving. "Amanda, I don't get it. Why help them like this? They shoved us down here and we're making transition guides for them?" I put a hand on her shoulder. Because everything we do with integrity. We don't let them decide who we are. And because when the time comes, those guides will prove just how much they relied on us. She didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. That same week, I had coffee with an old colleague, Martin, who now worked at a mid-sized firm downtown. I hadn't told my team yet. I wanted to test the waters first. "You still have that crew of miracle workers?" Martin asked, stirring his espresso. "I do," I said carefully, "though we're not exactly being treated like miracle workers these days." Martin leaned in, lowering his voice. "Funny you mentioned that. We're expanding. Big accounts coming in, more than our current staff can handle. We need people who can deliver under pressure. People who don't crack when things get ugly. Sound like anyone you know?" I smiled. "I can't promise anything yet," I said. "But if things don't improve where we are, I might be open to conversations." Martin didn't press, but when I left the cafe, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Freedom. Meanwhile, upstairs, Adrian's failures were becoming John's problem. At a Friday all-hands meeting, Adrian presented his latest strategic overhaul. He clicked through slides of sweeping changes, abandoning traditional client channels, doubling its spend on untested platforms, rebranding campaigns that were already successful. The room was silent when he finished. Finally, one executive asked, And what's the projected ROI on these changes? Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes darted to John. John jumped in, talking fast, throwing percentages that didn't add up. I caught the looks exchanged between executives, calculating, skeptical. Later that day, John stormed into the basement, his tie askew. I need the numbers from the Chicago account cleaned and ready by Monday, he snapped. Carla raised an eyebrow. Didn't Adrian already present his projections? John's face flushed. Just do it. We did. We always did. But this time we made sure to keep copies. That weekend, I invited the team to my apartment. Nothing fancy. Pizza boxes stacked on the counter, laptops scattered across the dining table. They looked nervous. It wasn't often I pulled them outside of work. Why are we here? Eric asked, pushing his glasses up. I took a deep breath. Because it's time to be honest with you. I've started talking to people, reaching out to contacts. There are opportunities out there, real ones, for all of us. The room went still. You mean, leave? May whispered. Yes, I said simply. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Together. Vega leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. After 30 years here, I thought I'd retire at this company. But sitting in that basement, it's clear they don't value us. If you're saying we can walk out of there and land somewhere that does, I'm in. Carla nodded firmly. Wren's eyes lit up with something close to relief. One by one, they agreed. For the first time in weeks, I saw their shoulders lift, the weight of humiliation easing just a little. Good, I said. Then here's the plan. We keep working. We keep smiling. We let them believe they've broken us. Meanwhile, I'll secure our options, and when the time is right, we walk, all at once. They looked at me with a mix of fear and hope. You really think we can pull this off? Wren asked. I met her gaze. I don't think. I know. As they left that night, I stood at the window, looking down at the city lights. Somewhere out there, opportunities were waiting. Somewhere out there, people would actually value what we could do. John thought he'd buried us in a basement. What he didn't realize was that basements aren't just for storage. They're where foundations are built. And we were building ours, brick by brick. By the first week of March, the basement felt less like punishment and more like a staging area. We still hit every deadline. We still documented every step. We still smiled when someone from upstairs came down to check in. But the mood had shifted. People weren't defeated anymore. They were alert. At 7:12 a.m. on Monday, my phone buzzed with an email from Martin. Subject: formal offer, team transition. Body: attaching roles and compensation for your entire team. We can accommodate staggered starts within 2 weeks. Dedicated workspace, equipment of your choosing, and budget approval for 2 hires you've been asking for. I opened the PDF and skimmed. Salary bumps between 22 to 35%. Titles that matched actual responsibilities. A hybrid work policy, and, crucially, a promise in writing. Creative autonomy and veto power on strategy when data didn't support an idea. It was the kind of respect you can't fake. 20 minutes later, a second message landed. From Priya, a former client now VP at a national retailer. Subject: pilot proposal. We want your team on a 6-month retainer. You choose deliverables. If results hit targets, we expand to a multi-year contract. I'll put this in writing if you're in. I stared at the screen long enough for the coffee to go cold. 2 doors, both open. At noon, I brought pizza to the basement, thin crust, everybody's favorite, and handed out printed copies of Martin's offer. I watched their faces as they read. Eric exhaled first, long and shaky. This is real. May pressed a hand to her mouth. Wren blinked fast, like she was trying not to cry. Vega read every word twice, then laid the pages down like a ceremony. Before anyone says yes, I said, we still finish what we started here. We do a clean handoff. No loose ends, no burn bridges. But you should also see this. I held up Priya's email on my phone. an optional retainer. If we take it, we walk in with revenue. Carla nodded slowly. That gives us leverage. Exactly, I said. And protection. We're not running. We're transitioning. On our terms. The door swung open before anyone could reply. John walked in with Marcus from HR on his heel. John's smile stretched too wide. Team meeting, he announced. Good news. He set a thin folder on our folding table like it was a trophy. The East Wing renovation is approved. We'll have space for you. Temporarily at first. Also, effective immediately, I can offer a 15% raise across your team. In return, I need you all aligned behind Adrian's strategy. The company needs unified messaging. Carla's expression didn't move. Vega's jaw did. I kept my voice even. Is the raise in writing? Marcus cleared his throat. We can get letters out by end of week. And the space? I asked. Is it ours, or are we bridging for someone else? John's smile twitched. You'll be upstairs. Optics matter. We need you visible. There it was again. Optics. Not value. Not trust. Optics. We'll review, I said. We'll let you know by tomorrow. John looked surprised I hadn't thanked him. Great, he said too brightly. Let's move forward together. When they left, the door closed on a silence so thick I could taste the metal in it. Ren was the first to speak. 15%? That would have been amazing 3 months ago. It's bait now, Vega muttered. It's data, I said. It tells us they're worried. I didn't say what I was thinking. You don't offer money and a move upstairs unless someone above you is asking hard questions. That night, at 8:43 p.m., I got the proof. An email from the CEO's assistant. Elena would like to meet with you tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. No subject line fluff. No explanation. Just a time. I didn't sleep much. I printed what I needed. A 5-year productivity snapshot with our team's deliverables. A resource allocation timeline showing the day we were moved to the basement. A clean, side-by-side comparison of Adrian's proposals and the actual data behind them. And a neutral, factual transition plan. 2 weeks, complete documentation, available for Q&A integrity in black and white. At 9:27 a.m., I was outside Elena's office. Glass walls, city view, minimalist desk, nothing to hide behind. She stood when I walked in. Amanda, sit. Her tone was level, but her eyes were measuring. I set my folder on the desk and waited. I've heard a dozen different versions of the same rumor, she said. Your team plans to resign together. Is that true? I haven't submitted anything, I said. But I've made sure we're employable. If we leave, we will do it cleanly. She didn't flinch. Why now? The basement? I know it was unacceptable. I signed off on the move because I was told it was temporary and necessary. I slid the first packet across the desk. This is 5 years of deliverables. Ours, by name. 72% of the department's shipped campaigns, 90% on time, 95% within budget. This, I added, tapping the next sheet, is the date we were moved to the basement and the subsequent drop in cross-team response times and QA pass rates. Elena scanned. Quiet. I kept going. This is a neutral review of the Chicago account Adrian is leading. You'll see inconsistencies between his projected ROI and the assumptions he used. Not malicious, just ungrounded. She turned to the last section. And this? A transition plan, I said. If we leave, we'll leave well. 2 weeks, full documentation, 8 hours of scheduled knowledge transfer per functional area. I won't let my team walk out and burn the place down. Elena set the papers down and looked at me for a long beat. Do you want to stay? I didn't answer right away. I want my team respected, I said finally. I want decisions to be driven by data, not optics. And I want authority to say no when a plan doesn't hold water. And John? She asked. That's your call, I said. But my team won't report to someone who put us in a basement to make room for a resume. She smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. I appreciate your clarity. She slid a blank notepad toward me. If I asked you to write the structure you'd say yes to, what would it look like? I wrote 3 lines. Direct reporting to the VP or CEO for 12 months to rebuild trust. Autonomy with accountability. Quarterly targets. Veto power against non-data-backed changes. Facilities, resources, suitable workspace, equipment parity, and hiring approval for 2 additions. I pushed the notepad back. If you can't do that, I understand. We have options. Elena read it, then capped her pen. Give me until tomorrow. When I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed again. This time from an unknown number. I answered. Is this Amanda? A man asked. I'm Samir, CFO at the Chicago client. We had a call with Adrian this morning. It didn't go well. He paused, choosing his words. We signed with your company because of you and your team. If you're not leading the account, we'll reevaluate. I hear you, I said. I can't make promises I can't keep. That's fair, he said, but we need a clear answer by Friday. When the line went dead, I stood there with the phone against my palm, the weight of it new. It wasn't just about us anymore. There were consequences outside our building. Back in the basement, I gathered everyone around the folding tables. We have 2 external offers, I said. 1 salaried, team intact. 1 retainer, revenue on day 1. The CEO asked for a day to respond to our terms. The client from Chicago hinted they'll walk if we're not on the account. Carla let out a low whistle. Darius rubbed his temples. May folded her arms tight across her chest. What do you want us to do? Ren asked. Exactly what we've been doing, I said. We document, we deliver, we don't leak. Tonight, check your handover notes again. Tomorrow might move fast. If you're watching this and you've ever been shoved into a metaphorical basement, I'd say to camera if this were already a video. Here's your reminder. Make a plan before you make a scene. But this wasn't a video. Yet. It was the line I kept repeating to myself. At 6:11 p.m., as we packed up, John appeared in the doorway again, alone this time. His voice had lost its bounce. Amanda, he said, let's talk. I can push the raises to 20%. We'll announce your move upstairs tomorrow. I'll put you as co-lead with Adrian. I met his eyes and saw finally what had been missing all along. Fear. I'll let you know tomorrow, I said. When he left, Eric muttered, Co-lead is code for babysitting. Co-lead is code for optics, I said, and tomorrow isn't about optics. I turned off the flickering lights, and for a second the room fell completely dark before the emergency strips glowed. In that breath of darkness, the plan felt solid, like stepping onto something that wouldn't give way. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual. The basement was still and quiet, only the hum of the fluorescent lights keeping me company. I laid out the final versions of our documentation packets on the folding table. Transition guides, project overviews, client histories, all meticulously prepared. One by one, my team filtered in. Carla set her coffee down and glanced at the papers. Feels like we're packing for a trip, she said softly. In a way we are, I replied. We just don't know which destination yet. At 9:15 a.m., I received a text from Elena's assistant. Board meeting moved up. Please come with your team. 9:30 sharp. I looked up. 7 pairs of eyes were locked on me. This is it, I said. The boardroom felt like another world compared to the basement. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The mahogany table gleamed. The board members, 10 of them, sat in their tailored suits, eyes sharp, expressions unreadable. Elena sat at the head, calm as always. To her left sat John. His tie was perfect, but his face was drawn, pale. Adrian was there too, shifting nervously in his chair, the confidence drained from his posture. Thank you for joining us, Elena began. We're here to discuss the restructuring plan for marketing, including concerns raised about team allocation. John stood, smoothing his jacket. As you know, he began, our department is undergoing a transformation. Adrian has been pivotal in spearheading this effort. His strategies will position us as leaders in innovation. The temporary relocation of Team B was necessary to optimize resources. Moving forward, I propose... Stop. The voice came from one of the senior board members, a silver-haired woman I'd only met twice. Temporary relocation? You put your highest producing team in a basement with no ventilation, no light, and leaking pipes. Did you think we wouldn't find out? John stammered. It was logistical. We had no choice. Elena turned to me. Amanda, would you share your perspective? I rose, my knees steady despite the weight of the room. With respect, this isn't about space. It's about priorities. We've delivered 70% of this department's campaigns over the last 5 years. We've exceeded deadlines, hit budget targets, and closed the largest deal in Q1 history. And yet, my team was pushed into a basement to make room for someone with buzzwords, but no results. I slid copies of our documentation down the table. This is our work. This is Adrian's. Compare the numbers. For a moment, the only sound was the shuffle of papers. Then one board member muttered, "This is damning." Another added, "The client feedback is clear. They trust Amanda's team, not Adrian." I kept my voice level. We aren't here to argue for scraps of recognition. We came prepared to leave. We have offers. Good ones. But Elena asked for a chance to respond. So here we are. Elena nodded, then addressed the board. You've seen the data. You've seen the results. My proposal is simple. Amanda's team reports directly to me. They receive the resources and authority they've earned. John remains in a reduced oversight role for administrative purposes. Adrian will be reassigned pending performance review. John's face drained of color. Adrian stared at the table. One board member leaned back, steepling his fingers. Amanda, is this acceptable to you? I met his gaze. It's acceptable only if my team agrees. I turned to them. Carla, steady as ever, gave a sharp nod. May's lips curved in a small smile. Vega muttered, "About time." The others followed. I faced the board again. Then yes. When the meeting ended, John tried to corner me in the hallway. You set me up, he hissed. You wanted this from the start. I held his gaze. Number you set yourself up when you put us in that basement. I just made sure the right people saw it. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since he arrived, he had nothing to say. Back in the basement, I told my team. The cheer that went up echoed off the concrete walls, a sound halfway between laughter and relief. Ren actually cried. Eric fist-bumped Vega, who looked as though a weight he'd carried for decades had finally been lifted. We're not done, I reminded them, smiling despite myself. We've still got to move back upstairs, this time for good. Carla raised her coffee cup like a toast. To daylight, she said. To daylight, we echoed. 2 weeks later, we sat in our new space. Bright windows, modern desks, plants back on the shelves. Adrian's desk was empty, his certificates gone. John's office door was closed more often than not. He'd been stripped of real authority, his power reduced to managing paperwork. We didn't celebrate his fall. That wasn't the point. The point was us. We had weathered humiliation, we had carried each other through, and we had walked out stronger. That evening, as the sun dipped low across the city skyline, I sent a message to my team. Remember this, the best revenge isn't destroying those who wrong you. It's building something they can never take away from you again. And for the first time in months, I felt at peace. Because we were no longer the team in the basement. We were the team that survived it, and built our own way back into the light. I knew something was off the second I saw his shadow cross the frosted glass of my cubicle wall. It was barely 11 a.m., and my manager, Tom, had that hurried, clipped walk he only used when he was about to swing his weight around. He didn't bother with good mornings or small talk. Instead, he stopped at the edge of my desk and said, flat and cold, "Shut down your workstation and leave." No explanation, no context, just an order. Now, in a normal office, that might mean grab your bag, take an early lunch, maybe we're having an impromptu fire drill. But this wasn't a normal office, and Tom wasn't the type to do favors. My desk wasn't just a desk. It was the only terminal directly linked to our biggest client's live feed. A high-security connection that streamed real-time product data, monitored inventory, and coordinated distribution for a launch that had been in the works for months. I didn't say anything right away. Just looked up at him. His jaw was tight, like he was daring me to challenge him. "You heard me?" he added, crossing his arms. "Do you want me to log out of the monitoring software or actually power down the system?" I asked, deliberately slow. He rolled his eyes. "Don't play games. Full shutdown. Now." I could have asked why. Could have reminded him the COO had been checking in daily on this project. But years of working under Tom had taught me that reasoning with him was like trying to teach a brick to swim. So I just nodded, turned back to my screen, and began the shutdown sequence. The secure console flickered through its warnings, disconnecting live stream, terminating processes, severing data feed. Each confirmation prompt felt heavier than the last. It took less than 60 seconds to pull the plug on months of careful setup. The screen went black. The terminal fan wound down to silence. It was done. I logged the action in the system audit. Client feed terminated, per manager instruction. No flourish, no commentary. Just a fact that would stay there forever. "Leave your badge on the desk," Tom said. I took it off my lanyard and set it down. "Am I coming back?" I asked. He smirked. "We'll see. Take the rest of the day. I'll handle things from here." He didn't wait for me to pack my bag, just turned and strode off toward the elevator. I watched him go, my mind already turning over the decision he'd just made. Tom had never liked that I was the only one trusted with the live feed terminal. I'd built the system from scratch when the client signed with us, a secure connection no one else in the department knew how to maintain. I documented everything, of course, but the COO had insisted the live feed remain in my control for security reasons. Tom called it territorial. I called it keeping a $2 million contract from collapsing. He didn't understand the stakes. Or maybe he didn't care. I took my time gathering my things. My phone buzzed with a couple of Slack pings, random chatter about lunch plans. Out of habit, I checked the feed status on my personal device, even though I already knew what I'd see. Offline. Completely dark. Tom wouldn't notice the difference immediately. He'd head to lunch, probably brag to someone about finally taking control of the feed. But I knew exactly what would happen next. The client had a major product launch in 2 hours. Their marketing campaign was synchronized with the live feed, their distributors standing by for green light signals only the system could send. Every minute offline was a minute closer to chaos. I walked past the reception desk, keeping my pace steady. "Heading out early?" the receptionist asked. "Something like that," I said with a small smile. The elevator doors closed behind me, and for a brief moment, I considered going home and letting the chips fall where they may. But the truth was, I wanted to see it. I wanted to be there when Tom's decision detonated in real time. So instead of heading for the street, I went down one floor to the small cafe that overlooked the lobby. Ordered a coffee. Sat by the window with a perfect view of our office entrance. 25 minutes later, Tom returned from lunch. His tie was loose, his phone in one hand, coffee in the other. He looked relaxed, like a man who thought he'd just made a big power move. He didn't see them at first. The client rep in her tailored navy suit, the COO standing beside her, both faces tight with urgency. They were waiting for him, right in front of the reception desk. I couldn't hear their words from the cafe, but I didn't need to. I saw the COO lean in, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Their product launch is in 2 hours. Why is the system offline?" Tom froze, mid-step. The coffee in his hand wobbled, and I just sat there, sipping mine, knowing this was only the first crack in what was about to be a very public collapse. From my spot in the cafe, I watched Tom's expression shift. It started with confusion, his head tilting slightly, brows drawn together. Then the first flicker of realization. The COO wasn't just stopping by for a friendly chat. The client rep leaned in, her gestures sharp, clipped. Her phone was in her hand, the screen angled toward him like proof in a courtroom. I could almost imagine the headlines scrolling across her mind. Critical system offline. Launch in jeopardy. Tom's mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. He held his hands out in that half-open way he used when he wanted to look cooperative, but was really just stalling. The COO's reply was short. His posture stiff, chin down, eyes locked on Tom's face like he was reading a confession. Then he turned toward the elevators. Tom hesitated, then followed, still trying to talk, the client rep trailing behind them. I didn't have to guess where they were going. The server room was on the same floor as my old desk. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the steam curl into the air. It wasn't gloating. Not yet. Just watching a situation unfold exactly the way I knew it would. By the time I went back upstairs, the energy in the office had shifted. You can feel it when something's wrong. Conversations drop to a murmur. People glance toward closed doors. The air feels thinner somehow. Two of the junior analysts were huddled near the printer, speaking in low voices. One of them spotted me and straightened. "Hey, I thought you left," she said. "I grabbed a coffee," I replied, keeping my tone even. "What's going on?" They exchanged a look. "The feed's down," the other one whispered. "The client's here. Tom's in the server room with the COO, and they don't look happy." I gave a small, sympathetic nod, the kind you give when you're pretending to be surprised. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I caught sight of Tom pacing, hands on his hips. The COO stood by the table, phone to his ear, his free hand tapping against his leg in a steady, impatient rhythm. The client rep sat stiffly, arms crossed, gaze fixed on Tom like she was trying to bore a hole through him. It would be easy to think I wanted this, seeing him flounder, watching his smugness chip away in real time. But it was more complicated than that. For months, I'd been warning him that the live feed was fragile in the lead-up to the launch. Not because the system was unstable, it wasn't, but because it relied on specific security protocols. The terminal was configured with encryption keys that couldn't just be copied and pasted somewhere else. Disconnected improperly, and the client's servers would reject any attempt to reconnect. I'd sent him the documentation. Twice. He'd skimmed the first page and tossed it aside. "This stuff's too complicated," he'd said once, laughing. "UIT people love to make it sound harder than it is." Except it wasn't too complicated. It was exactly as complicated as it needed to be to keep a $2 million contract safe from careless hands. The conference room door opened and the COO stepped out, his expression unreadable. He walked straight past my desk without a glance, heading toward the CEO's office. That was bad. Really bad. Tom came out a few seconds later. His face was flushed, color slightly askew like he'd been arguing and losing. He spotted me. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Finishing my coffee," I said, motioning toward the paper cup on my desk. "You were told to leave." "And I was told to shut down the terminal," I said, my voice neutral. "I did exactly what you asked." His jaw tightened. "You could have warned me." I blinked at him, keeping my tone level. "Tom, I confirmed the order twice. You didn't want explanations, remember?" He didn't answer, just turned and stalked back toward his office. By mid-afternoon, the whispers had spread. People were checking their phones, probably reading client emails or internal messages about the launch delay. The junior analysts were pulling up older backups, trying to find a workaround, but I knew it wouldn't work. The system wasn't designed to be patched together in an emergency. That was the point. We'd built it with strict security in mind. Any deviation, and it shut down rather than risk data corruption or leaks. And here's the thing about high-profile launches. They're like domino lines. One piece falls, and everything else follows. Marketing campaigns stall. Distribution freezes. Contracts start bleeding penalty clauses. I kept my head down, answering a few unrelated emails, acting like I wasn't listening when snippets of the unfolding disaster drifted over the cubicle walls. Around 4 p.m., I saw the client rep leave. She didn't shake Tom's hand. She didn't even look at him. The COO escorted her to the lobby, his posture rigid. Tom stayed in his office, blinds drawn. I sat there, letting the weight of the day settle in. I hadn't engineered any of this. I hadn't pulled a stunt or sabotaged anything. I'd simply followed an order to the letter, and now the consequences were piling up in a neat, unavoidable stack on Tom's desk. The thing about moments like this is, they reveal something important. Not just about the people involved, but about the environment you're in. A good leader takes responsibility. A bad one looks for someone to blame. And I had a sinking feeling that tomorrow Tom would try to make this my fault, which meant I'd need to be ready. I didn't expect to sleep much that night, and I didn't. My mind kept replaying the moment in the cafe, the COO's face tightening as he spoke, Tom's coffee hand wobbling, and then fast-forwarding to what I knew was coming next. Corporate disasters don't stay quiet for long. By morning, emails would be flying, calls would be made, and somewhere along the line, Tom would realize that the easiest way to save himself was to point the finger at me. When I walked into the office the next day, the shift in atmosphere was impossible to miss. People weren't making eye contact. Conversations stopped when I got close. On my desk, a single printed sheet of paper waited. Meeting at 9 a.m., Conference Room B. Attendees, Tom H., Anna M., HR, COO. No subject line, no explanation, which told me everything. At 8:59, I walked into the conference room. HR was already there, her notebook open, pen poised. The COO sat at the far end of the table, phone face down in front of him, expression like granite. Tom was leaning back in his chair, one arm draped casually over the backrest, the other holding a pen he kept tapping against the table, trying to look relaxed. "Anna," he said, giving me a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Let's go over what happened yesterday." I sat down, placing my notebook on the table. "Of course." Tom leaned forward. The live feed went down right before a major client launch. This caused significant disruption and reputational damage. Now, as I understand it, you were the last person to operate the terminal before it went offline. The COO's gaze stayed on me, unreadable. HR's pen hovered over the page. "That's correct," I said evenly. I shut it down per Tom's direct instruction at approximately 11:04 a.m. yesterday. The action was logged in the system audit. Tom shifted in his chair. "You could have told me it was linked to the client's feed. Instead, you just did it." I met his eyes. "Tom, I confirmed the order twice. The second time, I asked if you wanted me to delete the connection. You said yes. You didn't ask for an explanation, and you've told me in the past to avoid overcomplicating things." The COO's head tilted slightly. "Did you know the shutdown would sever the client's launch feed?" "Yes," I said. "And I also knew it couldn't be reconnected without reauthentication, which requires compliance approval. That's why I asked for confirmation twice." Tom laughed lightly, shaking his head. "She's framing it like I just signed off on tanking the launch. That's not what happened." I didn't look away. The audit log contains the exact text. Client feed terminated, per manager instruction. Time-stamped. Immutable. The COO turned toward Tom. "Is that accurate?" Tom hesitated. "It may be how it appears, but I didn't know what I was authorizing." "And yet you authorized it," the COO said, his tone still flat. HR scribbled something down without looking up. The meeting wrapped after 30 more minutes of circling the same drain. Tom insisting he wasn't told. Me repeating that I confirmed twice. The COO asking variations of the same question. Why did you give the order at all? When we left, Tom brushed past me in the hallway. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He muttered under his breath. I stopped walking. Enjoying watching the company lose a $2 million contract? No, Tom, but I am enjoying finally having something in writing. He froze for just a second before continuing down the hall. By lunch, word had spread even further. I could feel eyes on me in the break room, hear the low hum of speculation in the corridors. People love a scandal, especially when it's internal. I kept my head down and worked. There were still other clients to manage, other projects to run. The COO's office door stayed shut most of the afternoon, and Tom's blinds were drawn again. Around 3 p.m., an email from HR landed in my inbox. Please prepare any documentation, correspondence, or notes relevant to the events of yesterday. Forward directly to me before 10 a.m. tomorrow. That was the moment I knew Tom's situation was worse than he realized. HR doesn't put things like that in writing unless they're building a case, and I had plenty to give them. Back at my desk, I opened a folder on my personal drive. Every email where Tom dismissed my concerns. Every meeting note where he'd waved away security protocols. Screenshots of Slack messages where he'd bragged about streamlining by cutting corners. All time-stamped, all archived. I didn't need to manipulate anything. The truth was enough. By the time I shut down for the day, I had a neat, ordered file ready to send. A factual, clinical record of how we'd gotten here. Tom thought yesterday had been the crisis. He hadn't realized yet. It was just the first crack. I woke before my alarm, the gray light of an overcast morning cutting a thin line across my bedroom wall. My phone was face down on the nightstand, but I didn't need to check it to know what would be waiting. Emails, pings, calendar holds that looked innocuous at a glance and felt like subpoenas when you opened them. I got to the office 10 minutes early. The building's lobby smelled faintly of bleach and overbrewed coffee. Upstairs, the floor was too quiet. That particular don't make noise around a wounded animal, quiet. At 8:07 a.m., the COO sent a calendar invite. 9:30, emergency, client status, and next steps. Attendees, CEO, COO, HR, legal, IT lead, Anna, Tom, legal. That told me the temperature. At 8:22, HR replied to my document submission with a one-line email. Received. Thank you for the thoroughness. No emojis, no softening adjectives, just acknowledgement. Clinical, like a gloved hand placing a file on a steel table. I made tea I didn't want and stared at the steam until it disappeared. My screensaver reflected me back. Blouse crisp, hair neat, eyes steady. You wouldn't have known my heart was doing that controlled drummer's roll it does before fire drills and presentations. At 9:27, I walked into the big conference room. The blinds were half open, winter light flattening everything to the same paper color. The CEO stood at the head of the table with a printout in his hand. The COO sat to his right, jaw set. HR had lined up 3 pens next to her legal pad like scalpels. Our IT lead, Marcus, was already plugged into the projector. Tom took the seat far end, like he could put distance between himself and the screen. The CEO didn't bother with greetings. The client's counsel formally notified us at 8:51 that they're invoking the penalty clause for launch disruption. He said, they're also reserving the right to terminate for cause. He looked around the table. $2 million in annual revenue, at risk, plus penalties. A stillness moved through the room. Not shock. Recognition. The COO nodded at Marcus. Show the sequence. Marcus brought up the audit trail. He scrolled past routine entries, timestamps ticking like metronome clicks. Then the line sat there in 14-point font, simple as a kitchen knife. 11:04:17. Client live feed terminated, per manager instruction. The CEO didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Explain why that instruction was given. All eyes slid to Tom. He cleared his throat and tried on a reasonable smile. We were consolidating control of key systems. The terminal was owned by one employee. That's not scalable. It was the only terminal authenticated to the client's live feed. The COO said, flat, The reauthentication window is measured in days, not hours, by design. Removing it inside launch week is not consolidation. It's negligence. Tom's chin lifted a fraction. I was not informed that shutting down the machine would sever the live feed. If I had been warned, I kept my voice even. Yesterday at 11:02, I asked if you wanted a full shutdown or just a session logout. You said full shutdown now. I asked again if you wanted me to terminate the live connection. You said, don't play games. Marcus clicked to the cross-reference. My terminal log, Slack timestamps, Tom's calendar entry labeled Ops Cleanup. The timings nested together like puzzle pieces. No drama, just alignment. Legal spoke for the first time, glasses low on her nose. Ms. M, did you make any discretionary decisions beyond the instruction? No, I said. I executed the command I was given and documented it. Did you withhold information that would have prevented the instruction? I asked for confirmation twice, I said. Mr. H has repeatedly directed me not to overcomplicate explanations. I kept my language simple. I also sent him the security protocol summary last week. I slid a printed copy forward. This one. HR took it without looking up. The COO didn't move. He just watched Tom. Tom leaned toward the table, palms up, voice warmer now, like we were old friends who'd had a small misunderstanding. Look, the core issue is single-point failure. We can fix that by distributing access. After the fact, the COO said, yesterday you removed the only authenticated point during a critical window. The CEO set his printout down. We're not debating architecture. We're dealing with consequences. We have a client threatening termination, penalties accruing, and a system that cannot reconnect without a compliance cycle. He turned to me. How long to restore if we prioritize? I didn't answer right away. I pictured the steps, the signatures, the two-step with the client's security officer, the test packets, the validation hash. If the client cooperates immediately, best case 48 hours. Realistically, 72. There are external approvals we don't control. The CEO's jaw tightened in quiet calculation. Tom tried to wedge himself back in. Anna can accelerate it. She's done it before. I met the CEO's eyes. I can coordinate and execute, but it requires the process we agreed with the client. No shortcuts, no side doors. The room held its breath for a beat. That wasn't a threat. It was the truth. Process exists to protect people from exactly this. The CEO nodded once. Understood. He turned to HR. We will address accountability separately. Right now, we need to limit damage. HR wrote a neat line. It looked like a verdict even before it was one. The meeting broke into tasking. Marcus would prep the staging environment. Legal would triage the penalty language. The COO would call the client's COO and keep him on the line until our first handshake passed. Tom remained seated, staring at the table like it might offer him a new version of events if he just looked hard enough. When the room thinned, he followed me into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind us. The carpet swallowed our steps. Help me out here, he said softly. You know I didn't mean to crater the launch. Say I misunderstood you. Say anything that takes the edge off. I kept my voice calm. Tom, I'm not your edge. I let that sit. What I am is the person who told you for 3 months that these controls weren't optional. You called it territorial. You called it gatekeeping. He swallowed, color high in his face. Your tone doesn't help you, you know. My tone didn't shut down the feed. He leaned closer, voice dropping. If you hang me out to dry, you'll look vindictive. You'll get a reputation here. I blinked once. I have a reputation here. I do my job, I document, and I make sure people get paid and systems stay up. I'm not changing that today. He stared at me a second longer, then gave a tight, practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Careful, he said, and walked away. Careful. The word echoed like a thrown coin hitting tile. At 11:15, the COO asked me to join a call in his office with the client team. Their security officer sounded tired but professional. We stepped through the recovery plan line by line. I could hear keyboards in the background on their end, the muffled click of a door, a low voice asking for an ETA. "We'll prioritize approvals," their officer said, "but we're documenting root cause. Send your internal audit and the instruction chain." The COO glanced at me. I nodded. "You'll have everything within the hour," he said. We ended the call with timelines no one liked but everyone could live with. The COO exhaled once, long. "Thank you," he said to me. Not warm, not cold, just real. Back at my desk, I packaged the logs, the Slack confirmations, the security summary I'd sent last week, the change control calendar. Facts lined up in a row, each one small, together a wall. At 12:42, the CEO's assistant put a 30-minute block on my calendar. 3 p.m. Follow-up and accountability. Tom was on the invite, HR too. I saved my work and looked out across the office. Phones rang. Printers hummed. A laugh surfaced and died quickly. From Tom's office, the blinds were open again. He was on the phone, gesturing with a pen, his smile visible even through glass. Spin in progress. I thought about the message buried under the mess. Systems don't fail because someone followed a process. They fail when someone in a hurry decides the rules are optional. Leadership isn't about knowing every line of code or every clause in a contract. It's about knowing when to listen and when to ask the second question before you give the first order. I sent the audit bundle to legal, CC'd HR and the COO. Then I stood to refill my tea. The kettle hissed softly. Steam rose and vanished. In the glass of the break room, my reflection looked like it had slept. At 2:59, I was outside the conference room door. I could hear voices. Low, contained. The way people talk when they're arranging heavy furniture and don't want to scratch the floor. I opened the door. Tom was already seated, back very straight, hands folded on the table like a student hoping posture might count for extra credit. HR had 2 folders this time. The CEO looked up. "We're going to set the record," he said. And for the first time since yesterday, I felt the ground steady under my feet. Not because the outcome would be easy, because the truth was finally the only version left in the room. The door clicked shut behind me, and for a second all I could hear was the HVAC hum. Steady, indifferent, the sound buildings make when they don't care who keeps their lights on. The CEO nodded to the chair across from him. "Anna." His voice was level. "Thanks for joining." HR slid one of the 2 folders toward the center of the table, the tab marked with a small piece of red tape. Tom stared at it like it might detonate. "We're going to set the record," the CEO said, hands folded. "I want this simple." He looked at me first. "You shut down the live feed terminal yesterday at 11:04 a.m., correct?" "Yes." I kept my tone neutral. Per Tom's direct instruction. I confirmed twice. The action and the confirmation are in the logs I sent to legal at 12:42 today. HR flipped open the folder to a printed copy of the audit trail. My words sat on the page like a held breath. The CEO turned to Tom. "Did you give that instruction?" Tom inhaled, shoulders lifting. I gave an instruction to clean up. I believed we were logging out of a session. I was not informed that the system design would... "Did you give the instruction?" the CEO repeated. "To shut down the workstation?" Tom's eyes flicked to HR, then back. "Yes." A beat. No one moved. The building hummed. "We'll let legal finish their interviews," the CEO said. "But based on the chain of documentation, the external impact, and the client's current posture, we're placing you on paid administrative leave effective immediately pending the outcome." Tom blinked twice, slow, like a reboot that wouldn't take. "Leave? We need continuity. I should be part of the remediation." "The remediation is proceeding," the COO said, voice calm enough to cut. You won't be part of it. HR closed the folder. Your network access will be suspended at 3:30. Please remain available for further questions. Security will accompany you to collect personal items. Tom's mouth opened, then closed. He gave a small, practiced smile that looked cracked at the edges. This is political, he said, not to anyone in particular. You're making me the headline so the client has a villain. The CEO didn't flinch. We're acknowledging a decision and containing a problem. He glanced at me. The recovery plan? I opened my notebook. The steps were already in neat lines, each with a checkbox, each with a name. Staging handshake passed at 2:26. We'll receive the client's reauth token by 4:15 if their security officer hits her window. Our validation hash is ready on our side. If all goes clean, we can move to controlled reconnect at 5:30, monitoring for 2 hours before we widen scope. Best case then? The COO asked. We'll get status pings green for a subset today. Full throughput tomorrow after the second approval. Marketing will need to reschedule the public push. Ops can resume quietly tonight. No one cheered. Real life doesn't do triumphant music cues. It just assigns tasks. Do what you need, the CEO said. Then to HR. Coordinate with security. Tom's chair squeaked as he stood. He didn't look at me when he left. He looked past me like air would be kinder than a face. The door shut. The silence felt less dense. The COO turned to me. You'll lead the restore. You'll also propose a revised access model that prevents single-point operator and single-point manager failure. He let that hang for a moment. We'll fund it. That last sentence was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get from the building. I nodded. I'll send the draft by end of week. The CEO gathered his papers. There's one more item, he said, eyes on me. We're offering a retention bonus for carrying the recovery and a title adjustment. Interim director, systems reliability. Effective today if you want it. It's interim because you shouldn't be punished by a process that takes HR 6 weeks. I watched my pen roll a half inch and stop. Interim. Reliable. Words that fit like solid shoes. I wasn't naive. Titles don't erase what happened yesterday. But they do change who gets to say no next time. I'll accept, I said. He nodded once. Good. They left me there with the table and the hum and the folder with the red tab. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The building had already decided what it would say. At 3:28, I returned to my desk. Security arrived 2 minutes later, quiet, professional. They stopped at Tom's door. A few heads lifted, then dropped, the way people look at a solar eclipse through their fingers. I opened the secure console. The staging link waited, patient and blinking. The client's token came through at 4:11, 4 minutes early. I messaged Marcus, then dialed into the bridge. Voices checked in, one after another, clipped and businesslike. Ops ready. Security ready. Client monitoring ready. Systems ready. We ran the sequence aloud, like pilots at a cockpit, not because we didn't know it, but because saying it out loud makes people careful. At 5:34, the first green indicators returned. At 5:41, a second cluster lit up. At 6:02, the client's security officer said, "We're seeing stable flow on our end." She didn't sound relieved exactly. She sounded like someone who'd slipped out of a rip current and was treading water parallel to shore. Hold at current scope, I said. We'll widen at 7 if the logs stay clean. The COO unmuted just long enough to say, "Thank you." Then he went quiet again, listening. Leaders who know what they don't know are easy to follow. At 7:06, we widened. Nothing spiked. Nothing sagged. The lights kept stacking green, and the room around me, still half full of people who had stayed because they understood that payroll and launches are synonyms for rent and pride, started breathing like a body again. At 8:12, we ended the call. No speech, no victory lap. Just a list of follow-ups and a second bridge scheduled for 7 a.m. I shut my laptop and sat back. Across the aisle, someone exhaled and laughed once, the kind that releases exactly the air it needs to and no more. The office smelled like stale coffee and warm plastic. The janitor's cart squeaked in the hall. On my way out, I passed the glass wall of the conference room. The chair Tom had used was still slightly pushed back, like it remembered he'd tried to make himself bigger in it. Security had been discreet. There was no parade. He would go home and call someone and say words like context and miscommunication, and no one told me. Maybe he would believe them. Maybe he wouldn't. Outside, the night air had that iron taste it gets before rain. I stood on the curb a moment, phone in my pocket, city noise folding and unfolding around me. My reflection in the window looked like a person who had done their job. That's the message, I thought. And it wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about the quiet math of responsibility. Systems don't care who's liked. They care who's careful. People get paid or they don't. Launches happen or they don't. You can manage by posture or you can manage by process, but only one of those survives contact with the real world. The next morning, the client's COO sent a 2-line email. Appreciate the speed and clarity. We'll suspend termination while we review. Continue with the revised access plan. No praise. No absolution. Just oxygen. I forwarded it to the team. Then I opened a new document and titled it Access and Accountability Model V1. I started writing the section headings I'd had in my head for weeks, long before yesterday tried to make a point with a sledgehammer. At 9:03, an unfamiliar name pinged my inbox. An HR business partner from another division. Congrats on the interim role. When you come up for air, I'd like to talk about cross-training your approach to our other teams. I smiled, just enough to feel it. The building hummed. The green lights held. And for the first time in days, the rhythm in my chest matched the steady blink of a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect the people on the other end of the numbers.